Okay, so this week's lesson, I hope I've got my camera set up right for this particular one. This week's lesson, we are going to take these typefaces right here, and we are actually going to make them larger. All right, so they're relatively small, and what you need to understand is that these letters are currently wrong. Some of them are right, some of them are wrong. This was a hand-created condensed Gothic alphabet. You are going to be dealing with all capitals, and you're going to be turning it into a correct 5-inch tall word. Everybody's going to do the same word. So it's going to be Remy. That's the word that we're going to do, because that gives us a good diverse amount of letters, because we've got, the R, which has this wonderful little leg right here, and it's got a good counter space in there. We've got the E, which will tell us how thick the uprights need to be, plus it's got, it's an interesting character. We've got the M, which is a nice big blocky letter that we can work with. And we've got the Y, which is another major letter where we've got things coming in from different sides so that we can see what's going on. Okay? Now, hold on. I'm going to reposition some stuff here so that I can be sure that I can see what you are seeing. I'm going to adjust my camera just a teeny bit so that you can see everything that's going on this sheet. Okay? Hopefully you can see everything that's going on the sheet. I'm trying to give you as much light as possible. Anyway, if you have any questions, just be sure to ask. So I've got this scrap piece that is sitting here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fasten it down. I'm using a T-square. This is called a T-square. I use it because it gives me a uniform straight edge. Some people are used to measuring off of a side, and that's one way to do it. But that's generally not consistently accurate, okay? Now, with a T-square, everything doesn't have to be straight. Like this thing could be crooked if I wanted it to be. It doesn't really matter so much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some tape here, and I'm going to fasten down the scrap board. The reason I'm using the scrap board is because my table is not white, and so I want to be sure that you guys can see what's going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and fasten this thing down. Don't take this personally, Reed. This is the back of one of your projects. The board's going to be just fine. It's just I happen to need a board to work on. I'm not going to cut on it or anything. Okay. So the board is laid out. It's very comfortable. It's very happy. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten things to this. All right. So my very first thing is I am going to grab a piece of tracing paper. Okay. I don't need to use the whole sheet of tracing paper, but I do kind of need to start over here on the left-hand side, okay? Now, the reason that I'm starting on the left-hand side is because I need to move things to the right, okay? And you can see that in this example right here, okay? I started with a small Q, okay? Then I gridded it off and figured out how tall it needed to be, or how wide it needed to be in order to be 5 inches tall, and then the big one was made with a different grid, okay? So, here we go. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to lay out a baseline, okay? Now, it's like I said, it doesn't matter if this board and stuff is straight as long as I'm consistent and I keep my straight edge, or in this case my T-square, moving up and down against the side of the board, because then I'm going to get consistent horizontal lines. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fasten this paper down now. I'm not going to fasten it down too heavily because I do need to be able to lift this one up every once in a while. And I can build certainly more than one letter on this one sheet of paper. Okay, so I'm going to draw a baseline. Okay, the baseline is going to establish how everything else is going to be made. So I'm just going to lay down a nice baseline. This is what all the characters are going to rest on. Don't worry if it's at an angle, as long as everything is built using the same straight line, it's going to be straight. Okay, which is why I use a T-square. The T-square makes vertical lines that are truly perpendicular, okay, to the straight edge. Okay, so this makes all of my vertical lines, and this makes all my horizontal lines. Okay, in the old days, if we were drafting, this would be called like a drafting machine. We would have a machine that actually maintained a good perpendicular thing, but we don't happen to have that. Okay, because you guys don't have drafting machines at home. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start. I've laid my baseline down. So now I'm going to start with my very first letter. Okay, now for my very first letter, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with a letter R. You don't have to start with the first letter in your word. If you want to start with an easier letter like E, you can go right ahead and do it that way. Okay, now I'm going to lay this paper in. Okay, and I'm going to kind of carefully tape it down a little bit so it doesn't move while I'm doing the tracing. Okay, all right, so now I can actually trace it. Now when you are tracing a letter form, okay, you need to be, when you have straight edges, use a straight edge. Okay, so if this is my R, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a straight line for my R. Okay, the top of the R is a straight line, so I'm going to draw that. Okay, looks like I've got, you know, a couple vertical lines that are relatively straight, and so I'm going to go ahead and use this for those. Okay, I don't need to really draw the bottom one because that's my baseline. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is we can use French curves and all sorts of things to pull this off if we want to, but I'm just going to very carefully, and you'll notice I'm doing this in short strokes, okay, because I want this curve to be accurate. So I am not trying to do it in one fell movement. I'm sitting here very carefully, laying this in. As I have a room full of snoring dogs. Hopefully they aren't too distracting here. Okay, and now I'm coming down to the leg here, or the foot. Okay, I'm going to run it to the baseline. There we go. Okay, then I've got this counter here, and I'm trying to make that. Now here's one of the tricks as we're starting to build letters. You need to understand that the width of this counter space should be reflective of this counter space. The parts of the letter reflect other parts of the letter and other parts of the alphabet. Okay, so this curve right here should be very similar to the curve up here. Okay, now I've got a straight line, so I'm going to go ahead and use a T-square here to get that nice straight line in there. Okay, and I think I'm done. Yep, I'm pretty much done. Okay, so now to make all of this work, we're going to build a grid, and you can see the grid on this particular one. Okay, this isn't a complete grid, but this one is. Okay, so what I am going to do is I am going to draw a grid around this particular character, going to the outer limits of the character. So here's the edge of the R. I'm going to come up from there. Okay, here's the top of the R. Okay, so this is my top line. Okay, I'm going to draw there. Okay, we know our baseline. It's the same baseline we've been using. Okay, so now I have my rectangle around this particular shape. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and align it here and then just be sure that I bring the foot out a little bit more if I want to, but I am not going to get too stressed out about that. Okay, so here's how this works. I know that this character needs to be 5 inches tall. Okay, so there we go, 5 inches tall. So what I need to do is mark 5 inches, and that's going to be the top line of my finished character. So there is 5 inches, okay? And you may need to watch this video more than once to get the hang of this, but that's okay. Okay, so there's my top line. Okay, that's a 5 inch tall character. And using my T-square, and I could probably make 2 characters on here without any problem whatsoever. Okay, so how wide does this thing need to be when it's 5 inches tall? That's what we're trying to determine right now. And if we had a proportional scale, we could do it, but it's so much easier just to use the tools that you have. What I need to do is draw a line from this corner to this corner, and then continue that line all the way up to the 5 inch mark. That will tell me how wide my 5 inch character needs to be. So I am going to go all the way from here all the way up to the 5 inch. So I'm going from the bottom left corner of the letter to the top right corner of the letter all the way to the 5 inch in one line. Okay? Oops. I poked through my tracing paper there. Okay. All right. So this is going to give me how wide my character needs to be. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how the heck is that even possible? Well, I will show you. Okay. What I'm going to do is continue this line on the left limit of the letter all the way up. Okay. So here's just going to go ahead and take it all the way to 5 inches. Okay. And then where the lines intersect, okay, my scaling line right there, I'm going to draw another line. Another vertical line. Gosh darn, this thing just poking right through this tracing paper. Okay, so this rectangle represents how much space the 5 inch tall version of this R is going to be. So if we were to blow it up, okay, this is how much space it would occupy if it is 5 inches tall. Okay. So now what we're going to do is this. We're going to measure it, okay? So I know this thing needs to be, and there's no reason to go, oh, is it 5 5/8? Why not just go ahead and mark it on your ruler, okay? So there, I marked it on my ruler. So I know that I need to go all the way to here, okay? Now I am going to go ahead and I am going to draw my vertical, making sure that my T-square is aligned properly on the left. Okay, so I'm going to build my character inside of this space. Okay? All right, so now we need to actually make the grid. Okay, the grid is relatively simple. Really, it's just about intersecting these corners again and again and again and again. And if you look at the examples that I gave you in your handout, that's fine. It's okay if your lines overshoot a little bit, okay? So I made an X. I went from corner to corner and corner to corner, okay? So now I'm going to draw a horizontal line where those two lines intersect, okay? And I am also going to draw a vertical line where those two lines intersect. Okay? And now I'm going to continue that. Now I'm going from corner to corner. For those of you who are in illustration, we did this, okay? It's a very similar process. This makes it so it's much easier to trace things or much easier to draw things, especially when we're talking about curves. Okay, so I'm going to continue this. This one, We're going to go through this whole process together, and if at any point you need to pause the video and finish what you're doing and then catch back up, that's fine. Okay, now, where all of these intersections are, I need to go ahead and draw lines again. There's my horizontal lines. Okay, and then I need my vertical lines. How refined does this grid need to be? Well, it's a matter of how much detail you need in order to replicate the letter properly. Okay, so I could take it down another level if I wanted to. Okay, but this is probably going to work out okay, and that's the size of the grid that this particular one did. Okay, so now I need to draw that grid over here. Okay, here's the trick. Okay, since we're going to be correcting these characters as we go, it might be a good idea to draw this grid with a pen, okay? Because that way you can do lots and lots of erasing. Now I'm going to use the very finest black pen I have because I don't want it to overwhelm me while I'm trying to trace, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go from corner to corner. Okay, and I'm going to go from corner to corner. Maybe I should go a little bit thicker so you guys, I'm sure that you guys can see it. Oh, that's too thick. That's a little bit better. Okay, now you can see it that way if I go ahead and do this. Now with markers, one of the tricks about keeping a nice straight line when you're using markers is to, well, even like these microns, is to generally be pretty much up and down and to rotate the pen as you go so that you're moving through, you're using basically different parts of the pen as you go, and that way it can re-ink itself. Okay, so now we need to draw a line at that intersection. Okay, we need a vertical line at that intersection. Now when we get, oops, that's a little bit off. When we get into tech pens next week, we'll talk about why these rulers have, you'll see that some, well, like corkback rulers, you know, they're elevated away from the page, and so are these. These actually have an edge to prevent ink from going underneath. That's why they're there. Oops, and I did not complete that line, so I'm going to go ahead and complete that line. That's even worse. Okay, I should start over, but since this is a demonstration, in the interest of being smooth about this process, we will just keep driving on. Okay, there's my intersection, corner to corner in this rectangle. Corner to corner in this rectangle. This one. Now draw intersections for all of these. Okay, now I need vertical intersections. And since I'm going to use this as my my base grid, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do these outer lines as well while I'm here, so that I have a complete grid. And I'm actually going to draw the baseline in as well, and the top line. Okay. Okay, so I'm basically going from this little guy to this bigger guy. Okay, and I'm going to use the grid to help me trace it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my character sheet out. Okay, trying not to tear anything. Trying to hurry before my wife gets home and the dogs start barking. Okay, so that now that we can see pretty clearly what's going on, hopefully, let me double check my screen, be sure you guys can see that okay. Well, not really. It's really kind of... Here, let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see this. Actually, I'll just take the camera out of there so you can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you can see my little character on the one side, and then I reconstructed that same grid on this side. Okay, so now it's a matter of converting where we see the things on the R, on the small r, and putting them where the big R is going to need them. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom down a bit and see if we can kind of hopefully that'll be close enough to help you see a little bit. I'm going to get closer here, maybe. Oops, I lost it. So I'm kind of hoping you can see some of it anyway. All right, so this is my little character. All right, now I'm going to use a pencil. All right, now we know that the character is going all the way up the edge right here, and then we know that it, based on this, it kind of it starts curving right about here. Okay, so I'm basically putting a little bit of a mark. Okay, and I'm putting marks on these. They're like coordinates. And then this one is kind of I'm watching it here, and it's kind of like in here somewhere. Okay, and now I'm looking right here. Right there. Then it hits this line right about here. Then it comes back through just a little bit below it and comes out to here. And then over to here as it starts to come out. Where should we do that? Probably in here somewhere. Okay. And then it's going to kind of go straight down. So let's see. Yeah, let's put it right there. I'm going to make sure that these two dots actually line up because they represent the edges of the R right here. Okay. And then as I get down into here, I'm probably just going to go ahead and put the foot in. Okay. So I'm going to use some of the points I made. Okay. Paying attention to this edge right here, and I am just going to go ahead and kind of go up. Okay, so I'm going to consider this to be the edge of the character, and now so it's kind of a matter of connecting the dots, using nice short movements. Okay, I'm going to have it come to here. Okay, then it kind of rides it for a little while and then starts to go in. And it comes all the way over to here. Okay, and then it comes in a little bit. And it's okay if, you know, this isn't a refined line yet. You're just kind of, you're in the construction phase here. Okay, so now I can get rid of this this other stuff here. It's extra. Okay, and then it goes down to the foot down here. I'm going to darken this in so you can see it a little bit better. So the grid makes it so it's a little bit easier to kind of figure out where things need to be. Just makes life just a little bit simpler. Okay. All right, and so we would need to build the rest of this character too. Okay, so it's like, looks like, okay, this is in the center, so it's a little bit off to the edge here, and so I'm just going to go ahead and do this, which should mimic pretty much that movement, so I probably need to bring it down a little bit. And, oh, it doesn't actually go into that line. It doesn't ride the line up. It rides just to the inside a bit. So it's going to go up like this. Okay, and then it's going to start curving over like right about there. And then it kind of just makes it across there and then starts back down again on this side. But since those are straight lines, I'm going to use my straight edges. I'm going to make them really visible for you. Okay. Now I know that when we're developing characters that lines need to kind of align. So I know that this edge also represents the edge on the counter space up here. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw that in. Okay. How much of it, I don't know how much I'm going to need yet. And it looks like it's going to kind of go, and even though I don't see it coming over, I need it to mimic this space. So if I'm going to go this wide down here, I need to make it this wide up here. So I am not going to follow the illustration, the original one right here. Okay, and then it looks like something like this. Okay. All right. So now I've pretty much made this character. I'm actually going to adjust this a little bit because it needs to mimic that counter space above. And so if that's how much of a curve I have in the counter space above, I want that much curve down here. All right. So that pretty much lines me up and helps me figure out this character. Okay. Now, there are things wrong with this character. This leg should probably not be the same width as this leg. This is my upright. Okay. This space right here is the same upright that I'm going to use in the E. Okay. So if I'm looking at it right here, trying to do it on screen while I'm doing it. Okay. So if this is my E right here, you see this space right here? Okay. That is the same for that, is the same for this, is the same for this, okay, is the same as the H, is the same as the D, or excuse me, J, is the same as the K, is the same as the L, is the same as the upright in the M, and so on and so forth, okay? That is a consistent width, okay? So this letter Y is going to be the same width as this, okay? Which means you need to be consistent when you're doing that. So when it comes time to start correcting your characters, that's what you're going to do. I don't measure them. What I would do if I had all my characters made right here is I would mark that edge, and I would take it and go through and check it against my E, and check it against my M, and be sure they're the same. And if they're not, I'm going to go ahead and readjust them so they are the same. Okay? All right. So that's the initial process of tracing these characters and making them bigger. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the movie here for a minute, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're to the next phase now. All right. So in the first section, I went ahead and did this. Okay, so I resized it. Now, I'm using a separate sheet of tracing paper. There's a specific reason for this. This is the one I'm going to black out, okay? The reason I'm doing it on a separate sheet is so that I don't ruin my original if I need to make corrections, okay? So I am going to fasten this down to the tracing paper I was using before, and I'm going to be really, really careful with the tape this time, and I'm going to make sure that I put the tape on my pants to make sure it gets a little bit linty so it's not going to ruin anything, okay? Probably need one more. Okay. So, with these characters, I am going to lay in a pencil baseline, okay? This will help me when I'm trying to position them on the final board. Okay? Then what I'm going to do is I'm actually only going to copy the actual portions of the letter that are part of the letter. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. Okay? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. It's going to be okay if I overshoot a little bit, and I'm going to do this. Because again, this is still not a final phase, okay? It's just much easier to see if a character is working properly when it's blackened in, okay? That's really the whole point. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and lay this one down. And I'm going to bring this down in here like this and go ahead and show the foot. There's the edge of the foot, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring it up to that. Okay, and now I'm going to try to make this as smooth as possible. Don't feel like you have to do it in one stroke. But again, this is not the final version. This is just to double check your construction. Okay? And I'm coming up here and I'm going to do this one. Now, if we were at school, we would have access to more things to make these curves happier, which would be things like we have adjustable curves, which you can go ahead and set and then reuse over and over and over again, which can be kind of important because this curve and this curve should match. That's just the way characters are. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and come up here and I'm going to finish the top line. Oop. Okay, I did not rotate my pen. Okay, and then I have this guy. I'm freehanding it, and I really shouldn't be doing that. I should have used the ruler here. But I have a little bit of room for slop here because we're going to end up blackening all this stuff in anyway. Okay, so I've finished. I've drawn the character. Okay, woo! That's going to be super teeny. Where's my big brushy brush? Ah, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to use this to fill it all in. I'm not too stressed out about it because tracing paper is not very absorbent. I could use Sharpie, I could use lots of different things to make this happen, okay, but I would just go ahead and fill this whole character in to make it a nice, solid black character. I don't want to get too sloppy though, okay, especially around the edges. Be very, very careful with the edges. Usually I'll use a fine Sharpie, but that's not what I happen to have with me right now. And you would just go ahead and fill this whole character in, okay? And then what you'll end up with is, if you're to look at this one, okay, these guys, this is what we're going for, is this little guy right here, okay? And what's going to happen is after we've darkened all these in and we've corrected them and we've made everything right again, okay, everything's happy, okay, see, like, we need to bring this in. This shouldn't be as thick as this. And so if I were to correct the character, I would probably just bring this in just a shade, just a teeny bit, okay, not very much. But this space looks similar to this space, and so everything's happy, okay? Like if this was my E, I would have to say, oops, okay. I'm going to have to either make the R a little bit more narrow, or I'm going to have to make the E fatter. One of those things has to occur to make that happen correctly. So remember, I was talking about making sure these work, okay? So if this is my letter set, okay, this is what I'm talking about, okay? This is my upright width for every character. So that should match that, and it does. That should match the E, and it does, okay? And visually, it's about the A. Okay, the A is a little bit weird. We're not doing the A on purpose. A's are a little bit weird because, you know, this space and this space, creating something that looks about right, but it's really going at a different angle than you think it is. This is not perpendicular. Actually, this is going up at a slightly different angle than this. That's why we're not doing those. I don't like how flat the R is in this particular case. You'll notice they made the counter space much larger than my R, which would be fine as long as it's consistent, okay? So if you do that, make this that, okay? You make both of these the same width, and that's what this person did, okay? If this is going to be this wide, then this needs to be this wide. Okay, so just consistency in the characters. And here's another thing that would be consistent in characters, okay? The horizontals, okay? So if this is my T, then, oops, yeah, that's it right there, okay? That should also be my E. That should also probably be my A. And it is, and should be visually about this space, okay? So these horizontals are consistent as we travel across. The exception is sometimes the letter E is not quite as thick in the middle as it is on the top or bottom, okay? The top and bottom match, but this one might be just a little bit off. Certainly, this space is not the same as this space down here, okay? This space is slightly smaller. Not a lot smaller, just slightly smaller. So the word we're going to build is Remy, R-E-M-Y. Okay, which means you're not going to have any of the characters that travel below the baseline. Okay, which would be characters like the Q and the S and the C. Okay, those go below the baseline. Most big curved characters like that do. Some other things, if we were to do the full 5-letter thing, which we are not doing, is you would find that the letter S starts with a letter O. Okay, you actually start with the letter O and kind of chop it apart, and it tells you how to make the letter S. They occupy the same amount of space. We don't think about that normally, but that's kind of the way it works. S's are probably the very hardest letter to make when you are trying to correct and make a proper letter form. Of course, O's are easy, C's are easy, G's are easy, all of those characters. If you have an O, then you have the bottom of your U, okay? All of these characters are really, really similar. They all have relationships, and that's what you need to keep track of when you are building these letters. It doesn't matter if all of your letters are fat in the upright, as long as all of them have the same fat upright. Okay? And that's really, really kind of important. So what you're going to be doing with those is you're going to end up, once you've corrected them all and you have a full set of Remy that's blacked out, you end up cutting it out, and you definitely want to have that baseline. And on a scrap piece of board somewhere, okay, or this one's just even on paper. It doesn't need to be something super rigid. And then what you're going to be doing is working out the spacing of these characters, okay? How the relationships to one another, tracking or kerning, as it were, okay? How far over does the R need to be? Because of the shape of the A, how close do the other characters need to get to the side of that A? And so you're going to be spacing your letter out, your word out, and making it nice and happy in its space, and making sure that they don't look like individual letters, that they look like a word. Okay, a complete word. Sometimes the characters get too far apart, then it doesn't read as a word. We need it to read as a word. One of my tricks is I will put these on here, and what you do is you spray mount them and then let the tracing paper dry, and then stick it on, because then it becomes repositionable adhesive. You can keep reattaching it as long as you let it dry a little bit before you try to attach it. And then you can start to play with this a little bit. Okay, so you just draw a baseline on your scrap and then just start putting these on here and trying to figure it out. You do not want to cut all the way to your black line. Okay, don't do that. If you look at this one, you can see that this left some edge. You want to leave some edge. Don't try to run it all the way up to the edges. You will regret it. You will regret it when you're all said and done. So if you want to get a jump on next week and start to play with this, play with positioning, it's a matter of I'll take these things and kind of put it up on the wall and kind of squint at it and see what the spacing is, and maybe I need to pull the E over a little bit, or I need to pull the R over a little bit. Work it out visually, and that will set you up for next week when we actually have the spacing done and we create a transfer sheet to move this over to our final board for inking. Okay. Plus, we'll also talk about tech pens next week as well. Okay. Even though we're not going to use them, we're going to talk about them just so you have some exposure to technical pens. All right. So that's the deal with this week. Okay. You're going to need to blacken in these characters and make adjustments to them. Make sure all of your characters really belong together. Get rid of weird, wonky things like this. This character is definitely not in very good shape. And so, you could go ahead and bring it out to here and maybe adjust this curve a little bit somehow. You can make adjustments to it. That's why you aren't ruining your starting point, because you can go back to your starting point, which is pencil, make those corrections, then transfer the, ink in a proper letter form. Okay? All right. So that should set you up. Okay? Get you ready for next week. So I hope that was helpful. And if not, please show up at one of the office hours so we can work it out, or watch this video a couple times so that it really sinks in what we're trying to do here. So we are manually resizing and we are manually correcting the font. Okay? It will give you a deep understanding of the characters. That's the reason we're doing this. If we were to do this on the computer, it would be done in 30 seconds and you wouldn't have learned anything about the character. Doing it this way, you become vested in your character. It becomes important how it looks, its relationship to the other characters. It makes you think about those relationships, which is critical for understanding and doing good typography. Okay? So we're all doing the word Remy. That's only 4 letters. They're not hard letters. I think the R and the M are going to be the hardest characters for you to do. Okay? And enjoy and have a great day. Bye-bye.